ever since he entered office, there has been a series of issues with Councilmember Josh Binda, some just ridiculous and some very serious. On the ridiculous side of things, he was on his Instagram posting shirtless photos of himself to pitch these speeches he gives to children at schools, which, you know, I think there's an immaturity and like a self-centered aspect of this, that he's just a narcissist and he didn't realize, like, hey, maybe when I'm talking about speeches that I give to school children, I shouldn't post a shirtless photo of myself, like giving a sexual sort of look at the camera, you know. Again, 21, you know, I can't be held responsible for all the pictures I posted on social media at the age of 21. So some of that stuff I think would have been forgiven, but it just kept coming for Josh Binda. He had some serious PDC violations for misuse of funds. He was using Lynnwood City Council chambers for political purposes and campaign purposes, or his outside, speaking engagements to promote those, I think it was. So those were serious. He never paid his PDC fines, and then he went before the Public Disclosure Commission and gave him the most insane excuse I've ever heard for not paying your PDC fines.
Do you have access to a bank account now?
Well, I have access to a bank. This might sound young to me. I've never written a check or done a check before. I don't have a checkbook or any of that sorts. So the whole checking process is fairly new to me.
Yeah, maybe evidence you shouldn't be a city council member, or you're not mature enough or old enough to be a city council member, or you're in charge of like finances of the city and what the city spends money on, etc. If you don't know how to write a check, or you can't just Google it to figure it out, which is how most people in our generation and his generation figure out something if they don't know how to do it. So it's just all these things that kept adding up for Josh Binda. But he is, he's survived all of that. His political career has weathered that storm. I do not believe it will weather this storm. So the Lynnwood Times late last week dropped this bombshell investigation into Josh Binda. The headline, "New investigation, Lynnwood City Council Vice President Josh Binda alleged Everett address." So they find out through some tips and some sleuthing that more than a year ago, City Council member Josh Binda was evicted from the apartment he'd been living at in Lynnwood. And since that time, all evidence showed that he was actually living in the city of Everett, which, by our interpretation and the Lynnwood Times' interpretation of laws around this, he would not be able to continue to serve as a Lynnwood City Council member. But the allegations get much deeper than that and much more serious than that. This, again, from the Lynnwood Times. Lynnwood City Council Vice President Josh Binda was evicted from his Lynnwood apartment in 2023 and has been allegedly living at a South Everett address for at least the last 12 months he has served on the Lynnwood City Council. The other issue is that he apparently voted using his address he was no longer living at in Lynnwood, which of course is a violation of election laws. The Lynnwood Times says election records obtained by the Lynnwood Times indicate that Council Vice President Binda may have violated state and federal election laws by having declared the address he was evicted from in November 2023 as his home address with the Snohomish County Auditor, for which he then used to vote in the 2024 elections. According to the Secretary of State's office, Binda declared a Lynnwood P.O. box as the location to receive his mail-in ballot, because of course if he had it sent to his Lynnwood apartment where he was supposedly living, it would have been returned to sender because he got evicted from that apartment in the fall of 2023. The Lynnwood Times goes on to say the investigation further uncovered that Vice President Binda, 25 now, owes just over $18,000 in unpaid traffic citations, PDC fines, and several legal judgments against him. Records also show that within the last 5 years, Binda had a total of 18 court cases related to wage garnishments that involved the city of Lynnwood. So the Lynnwood Times, and all the credit in the world to the Lynnwood Times, we'll play some clips from the owner of the Lynnwood Times and the reporter on this story coming up in a moment. We had them both on Sundays with subscribers. So they find ample evidence. I mean, they spell it out. It's very clear that Josh Binda has been lying about where he lives, that he voted in Lynnwood and for all the races associated with someone who would vote from Lynnwood when he actually lives in Everett, representing the city of Lynnwood on the council when he's actually been living in Everett, has $18,000 in all these unpaid fines. So here's how City Councilman Josh Binda, again, now 25 years old, reacted in only the way someone his age could react to this reporting from the Lynnwood Times at the city council meeting that happened right after the story was published.
I have officially filed for protective order against Mario Lockmore and the owner of the Lynnwood Times for the safety of myself and my family. And I'm doing this because I don't want any other public servant or community member to be treated the way that I've been treated at the hand of his dangerous and gross misinformation as well as fake journalism.
Good grief.
I especially do not want any other young person who's bold enough to want to run for office and take part in our democracy to be treated the way I've been treated the past 4 years by Mario Lockmore and the Lynnwood Times.
What a narcissist. I mean, that's the only word that you can use to describe it. He has not provided any information that would show that the reporting from the Lynnwood Times was inaccurate. And he, I mean, this just shows he doesn't understand how things work. He went to court and he filed an order of protection against the owner of the Lynnwood Times, who didn't even write the story, by the way. It was a reporter named Keenan Briscoe. He asked the court to give him an order of protection against the owner of the Lynnwood Times, which, thank God, the court denied and said, basically, First Amendment. Like, the order from the judge was one sentence. It was like, this has some serious First Amendment concerns. And he's a public figure. News entities are allowed to report on public figures. That's not harassment. That's just reporting the truth. And that's what you signed up for when you decide that you want to be a public figure. What I also think is interesting, there's a couple things about that order of protection he filed. So Josh Binda goes to court again to file this order of protection. You want to guess the address he used to receive court documents back as part of this filing? And he used an Everett address. So in filing the order of protection, the unsuccessful order of protection against Mario Lockmore, he actually listed an Everett address. That was the address they said in the reporting that he was living at, not in the city of Lynnwood. So he just told on himself. He also inexplicably asked the court to fine Mario Lockmore $15,000, which...
Wait, no, it was 17 something.
Yeah, which, first of all, if you're filing an order of protection, that's not a civil law, so you can't just say, right, I want an order of protection and I want $17,000. It's like, that's not a thing, right? But match that up to the amount of unpaid fines. What was it? He's got unpaid traffic citations, PDC fines, and other legal judgments. Those add up to about $18,000. This order of protection against a newspaper.
I think it was 18.
He's just asking them for more than $15,000 for whatever reason. Gee, what? Takes a rocket scientist to figure that one out. So it's just crazy, but I laugh about it because it's so absurd. But we had Mario Lockmore on Sundays with Subscribers this week to ask him about all of this and just to talk about, because they're running circles around old media. You think that the Everett Herald and mainstream publications would have done the work to dig this stuff up and to find this stuff up about Josh Binda? Of course not. Would have never done that, in part because he's a young black man and you can't dig deep into the background of someone because their skin color gives them some sort of extra protection in Washington state. So we talked about the Lynnwood Times, but also, as Mario Lockmore said on the show, especially when it comes to potential voter fraud, right? And election integrity issues in state law, this could end up being a very serious legal situation for Josh Binda. What consequences do you think Josh Binda could face as a result of what the Lynnwood Times has uncovered?
I've had people call me, various from attorneys to non-attorneys. And if Councilman Binda continues, I think he is going to be in some serious legal, maybe even criminal, suffering some criminal consequences.
Well, because if you're lying on documents.
He's lying on documents. He may, people are accusing him of possibly committing fraud in the sense of stealing money from Lynnwood, because if he wasn't eligible to be in that seat for a year, and he's collected the the salary for a year, compensation, then that would be a legal challenge coming to him from residents of Lynnwood. Also, he could face consequence with the Secretary of State's office if he is found that to not be a resident or that address is not legally where he lives. He could be suffering consequences there. I believe the lease would be a Class C felony.
Because you're voting
Correct.
in a district and for races that you shouldn't be voting for.
And then the consequence can go as much as 10 years in federal prison.
Yeah. So has he at all?
So I'm not taking it lightly because it's serious.
Oh, it's
and
very
I hope
serious.
he understands. And I just want to add that this is a disservice people do. Also, a community does. Remember, you ever heard of suicidal empathy? So you just have this empathy, and you always want to show people compassion. You could show someone compassion to death.
Yeah.
And it's when we go back to Binda having with the PDC issue, the Attorney General's office really came harsh at him. They wanted to fine him $2,000. That prosecutor they had there, she was good. I mean, she was right on target.
Yeah.
And then the PDC laughed it off. I'm sorry, PDC, that's how it appeared. You guys laughed it off. You thought it was a political witch hunt.
Yep.
You then say, no, we're going to strike it down to $1,000. And then someone made a motion, we're going to waive the $500, in which he just had to pay $500 on the fine, in which he had thousands of dollars in misuse of campaign finances, in which he didn't even pay that, by the way, to this day. And so when you go through this history of constantly showing compassion and giving people grace, and then they don't somehow make a change in themselves, what happens is that this person could have suffered a consequence here that may have been a life-changing consequence for them, enough for them, not like really heavy penalty, but enough for them to say, okay, I need to change my behavior. So now look at what has happened. If we go over the years, and now a person, because he
got away with so much, and it's that small stuff, and then the ball just keeps rolling.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna ask you, do you think that this is, and I call it pathological altruism, which I think is kind of the same idea. Do you think it's because he's a young black man?
What do you mean by that?
Do you think that because it's a progressive place, he's a young black man who started off as a BLM activist, that he's getting this sort of hands-off treatment? Because he's used race. He has said that the attacks on him are about his race.
I'm going to be 100% honest with you.
Do it.
I come from a different country.
Yeah.
I come from the Caribbean. People from the Caribbean have a very different outlook when it comes to race. So I know this is not going to be a very popular answer, but your answer is yes.
Yeah.
The Americans suffer because of slavery, a white guilt.
Yeah.
They do. That's something that I can never get because I see it. I don't know why. I understand why. I do. I don't want to sound ignorant. I understand why they do, but they don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong feeling that compassion for people or feeling that, certain policies may have put someone in a certain place, but don't let that blind you to justify poor behavior that you won't accept for anyone else.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm glad that he was honest about that answer, about don't let, that blind you, the color of his skin blind you to what he's doing. And I'll just say it because I can say it and not get fired by anyone. If this had been a white council member, the Everett Herald would have been all over it. If this had been a white council member, he would have been shamed out of office 2 years ago. That's the bottom line. But because this is a BLM activist who uses race, I mean, you literally had the NCAA, the NAACP come in and say that this was after one of the PDC stories, I think, that this was about race, that people were targeting him because of the color of his skin. No, it was about his actions. And there's been so many actions. And I think this broader story, like, do I ultimately care about a single Lynnwood City Council member in the grand scheme of things? No, but this is about corruption. It's about the fact that it takes a new media company, an independent newspaper that operates with a handful of employees to be able to dig this up and to have the courage to report on it. And it's all just insane, but it shows. It's all about this like identitarianism, hands off, oh, it's a young black man. I will say, so as bad as this whole story is, highly recommend you going to read the updates at the Lynnwood Times. As bad as it is, we're told today there is actually more coming out from the Lynnwood Times. So also on Sunday's show, we had Keenan Briscoe on. He's the reporter who actually wrote the story. And he gave us a little exclusive scoop about a story coming out about Josh Binda today.
There is something that we're looking into that I can share is, so there seems to be some resume and bio embellishments. If you go on the city council website, he says that he attended University of Washington for business, but I confirmed with the University of Washington that there's nobody enrolled, nor is there an alumni that went to the University of Washington. We have yet to confirm that he got his engineering certification from Snow Isle Tech, which he's claiming to be an engineer at Blue Origin. I find it hard to believe that an engineer is working as an engineer without proper certification or degree.
Wow.
There's also seems to be some volunteerism embellishments as well, based off of some volunteers that allegedly worked alongside him.
Wow. I mean, if true, that's pathological.
The student body is another one. We confirmed with the Mukilteo School District that he wasn't a member of the student body. He claimed to be president. So,
that's stunning, because these are things that, as you say, they're so easy to prove or disprove as long as there's a journalist with the time and desire to look into it. So they're saying they did a simple kind of look into his resume and his bio, and many key aspects of it are completely fabricated. And that story is coming out about Josh Binda today in the Lynnwood Times. Exceptional reporting. If you want to watch our full interview with Mario Lotmore and Keenan Briscoe about just navigating this new media world, and also their reporting on Josh Binda, we just aired it yesterday on Sundays with subscribers. You can sign up, $5 a month, undividedpod.com, undividedpod.com, and go read the Lynnwood Times, support the Lynnwood Times, because again, no old media, no legacy media newsrooms are willing, I think, to do this reporting into Josh Binda. You know, when it grows to such big levels that they kind of can't ignore it, they'll put out sort of a tepid story or whatever it is. This is blockbuster. Potentially violating election law, lying about his address, is he even able to legally serve as a Lynnwood City Council member? And what about the salary he's been paid while he's been serving and not living in the city of Lynnwood? And then you have, according to the Times, a story coming out today that he has fabricated key aspects of his bio. This is insane stuff. Let's see the extent to which the Everett Herald is willing to cover this. The Seattle Times is willing to cover this. Mainstream news outlets are willing to cover this. The Lynnwood Times and new media is running circles around old media with a fraction of the staff, a fraction of the money, and it's because they're willing to actually do the hard work. They're willing to overlook his skin color and the fact that he was a BLM activist and the fact that whenever they do a story, people accuse them of racism, because to them, they understand the role of the media. They understand it's about holding powerful people accountable, regardless of their skin color or their gender or their sexual orientation. You don't get special treatment. And the Lynnwood Times has gotten all sorts of blowback, as I said, for this reporting about very clearly corrupt, inappropriate, maybe illegal conduct because of the guy's skin color. I mean, Mario Lotmore had an order of protection filed against him. Thankfully, it wasn't successful. But that's just insane stuff.